So, welcome to Facebook Ad Managers for Beginners. It'll be hosted by myself, but it'll be presented by Alex. She actually works for Meta, and she's a core product adoption manager. So she knows everything you need to know about Facebook ads. It's a really great presentation, and I'm sure there'll be lots of great insights for all of the arts and culture organizations who are currently logged in. So, without further ado, I'll pass over to Alex, and we'll go from there.
Hi, so nice to meet you all this morning. I'm going to start sharing my screen and hopefully you all can see it. Amazing. Thank you so much for that lovely intro. And yes, I'm really excited to chat with you all today. So I work within our entertainment and media partnerships team here at Meta. I'm actually based in New York. So I'm calling in from my tiny New York City apartment this morning, but I help all of our partner managers and our media and entertainment arts creator partners across the globe with products like ads and ads manager. So that's why I'm here to chat with you all today. And for the rest of the hour, like was mentioned in the intro, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about some of the basics and fundamentals when it comes to building out ad campaigns on our platforms. So what I really love about this session and this presentation is we really focus on going beyond just boosting posts. Boosted posts are great, but there's a lot more you can do when you actually look at Ads Manager and get really strategic when it comes to audience targeting and different creative targeting and testing that you can do for your campaigns. So most of the session today will focus on those details in Ads Manager and all the different decisions that you make throughout the different stages of campaign creation in Ads Manager. We'll end off by talking a bit about some creative best practices, some testing opportunities, and then what type of reporting is also available within the platform as well. So we do have quite a jam-packed hour, so we're going to save those questions for the end. But to start off, I think it's really important to talk about the difference between some of the different manager tools that exist across Meta. To start, there's Business Manager, and that's really your one-stop shop for housing all of your Meta assets, so your pages, your IG accounts, your ad accounts, for example. Business Manager is where you go to give permission to these assets, to assign roles to different assets, and to give third-party partners, like another agency or another brand, for example, access to something like an Instagram account without actually sharing out the password information. Commerce Manager, on the other hand, some of you may or may not be familiar with it, but this is just the tool that we have to help you with your Instagram or your Facebook shop. So it's where you would go to manage your catalog, to customize the look and feel of your shop. And then lastly, there's Ads Manager. And again, this is where the bulk of our session today will be focused. But Ads Manager is really where you go to build out anything and everything to do with your ads. So building out campaigns, but also monitoring performance, being able to download and export and share out those reports, and then also where you go to do basic testing for your ad campaigns. Now, the most obvious question, but it's definitely very important, is how do you actually access Ads Manager? And so following the session today, I will work with the team to share out a version of these slides that you'll be able to reference in the future as a resource. But this link, this URL will be included in that reference tool. And this URL will always bring you to your Ads Manager homepage. If you have access to more than one ad account, you'll actually be able to toggle between the different ad accounts by using the drop down at the top. And if you're not sure what an ad account is, that's basically just the house within our Meta world where all of your campaigns, ads, audiences, for example, are saved in. So you can actually have multiple ad accounts within a business manager, but what's important to know is that you cannot move ad accounts between business managers. So if, let's say, for some reason you lose access to one or you need to open up a new business manager and move pages and whatnot over, ad accounts cannot be moved over with those pages. Another really important call out is that by default, every Facebook profile actually has a default ad account associated with it. Usually that ad account will be named in your name, for example. And if you are someone who maybe is selling things on Marketplace or running ads in that way, your boosted Marketplace ads will be tied to your personal ad account. And the most important thing just to note is that if you are using ads for professional or business reasons, we usually recommend that you create a net new ad account that lives in the business manager that houses all of those business assets. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is the hierarchy of different decisions that are made throughout the campaign creation flow. And what's important to know is you can see that as we move from top to bottom, the decisions get more granular and they really can differ depending on the type of campaign that you're building out as well. Now, this may look daunting to start, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to work through the different decisions that you'll be making at the campaign, then the ad set, and then the ad level throughout the rest of this session. But as an overview, this is what that flow will look like. Now, at the campaign level, the most important decision you're going to make is choosing the ad objective for your campaign. And the most important rule, if you have to take away one thing from this session, is that the meta ad auction is a very literal process. And we'll talk about the ad auction in a few slides. But why that's really important is you want to make sure that your ad objective ties up as closely as it can to the end goal that you're trying to drive with this ad campaign. So you can see on the screen here, we have the traditional marketing funnel. We have that upside down triangle shape that goes from top of funnel to bottom of funnel, where the top of your funnel is really working on just building up brand awareness. It's probably a very large pool of people that you're trying to engage and interact with. But as you move to the bottom of the funnel, the number of people in that pool or that audience naturally becomes smaller, because at the top, you're really just trying to get people aware of your brand. In the middle, you're really just trying to share out more information about your brand so they can learn more and potentially become a warmer audience. And then at the bottom, that's when you're really asking that specific audience to take an action and drive a conversion. And therefore, it's a smaller group of people who are going to be likely to take that action. Why this is really important is that the ad objectives you're able to select within Ads Manager actually map back to these three main buckets as well. So from a brand awareness perspective, you can choose a reach or a brand awareness optimization. Within the consideration bucket within the middle of the funnel, you can choose optimizations like a traffic campaign so people can land on your website to learn more, or a lead ad where people can actually fill out a form within Facebook or Instagram, and then you would get their email address, then you can share out more information about your brand or your programming or what's upcoming. And then lastly, with conversion, like it suggests, they're really trying to drive someone to take an action and convert. So that could be something like making a purchase on your e-commerce website or on your website. Now, this table shows all of the different ad objectives that are available for each bucket. We won't go through each of them today, but I think this will be a really great slide and page for you all to reference as you look at the takeaways from this session and start to get familiar with building out your own ad campaigns within Ads Manager. Now, the next most important question that we get is, how does my audience actually see my ad once I go through this whole flow within Ads Manager? And that's by winning the meta ad auction. So what you're seeing on the screen is the equation for our ad auction within Meta. Essentially, your ad wins by having the highest total value score. So what goes into that score? Well, it's your bid. So essentially the budget that you've chose for your campaign. The next most important variable is your estimated action rate. And this is essentially our analysis of the decisions you've made when you're building out your campaign. How likely is it that we think that the audience you've identified based off of your targeting is likely to take the action, so the ad objective that you've selected throughout your campaign? And there's lots of different factors that go into the machine learning that make this calculation. For example, people's historical activity across the platform, people's on or off platform activity. Those all in combination with your bid create one of the variables that go into this equation. And then lastly, there's the ad quality. And ad quality is really referring to the quality of the creative. So have users on the platform hit ads similar to this in the past from their feed? Or have they clicked and engaged with the ad, for example? Have they shared it? Have they tagged a friend? Lots of different ways that people give a signal for ad quality. When you think about the different factors that you can control within this equation, for example, creative and ad quality is definitely something that has a high control, as well as bid, And then estimated action rate, that's where you can really start to test around with different audience targeting or different ad objectives. Now, the screen has a lot of information on it, so there's no need to worry about taking screenshots or anything like that. We will share it out, but I think this right here is your campaign creation cheat sheet. Lots of really important tidbits of information on here. To start, I think folks may have seen or heard about the learning phase in the past, and that's basically when you create a campaign within Ads Manager. As soon as the campaign is created, you'll notice that once it is published and approved, it goes into something called learning. And that's just this initial period in time where your campaign is starting to optimize. It's getting some signal, people are engaging or not engaging. And essentially, that initial learning phase or beginning portion of your campaign has fewer percentage of your budget being spent because it's still learning. So it's a less efficient time. It's really just in the learning phase. How a campaign gets out of the learning phase is by achieving 50 conversions or actions, let's say, per ad set per week. And why that's really important is, let's say you've selected a traffic campaign. You need to achieve 50 link clicks per conversion per ad set per week in order to get out of the learning phase. But if you selected a purchase conversion campaign at your ad objective level, then you actually need 50 purchases per ad set per week. So you can see that depending on the ad objective that you selected, getting in and out of learning could be easier or more difficult depending on that ad objective. And we'll come back to that in just a few seconds. So how do you get out of learning quicker? Because as we know, the faster you get out of learning, the more efficient your campaign is going to be. Well, to start, less is definitely more. So whenever you can consolidate campaigns or even ad sets, that's better. When you have many campaigns that are touching many different audiences, chances are that you are potentially double dipping. And as a result, your budget is going to be spread over a much wider net of people and potentially less efficient. What's also important to know is that ad review can take up to 24 hours. So if you have a very time-sensitive campaign or a launch that's happening a specific date, you want to make sure you plan ahead and get all your creative in ahead of time so you can get that creative approved and your campaigns can be launched in a timely manner. Third, once a campaign actually exits learning, amazing, you're in the sweet spot. You want to make sure you're minimizing any changes to that campaign because big changes can actually cause the campaign to re-enter into learning. And when I say big changes, what I'm referring to are changes like changing creative, changing the audience targeting, changing the campaign budget, for example. If you think back to the previous equation, if you're making changes to any of those big variables in the total value score, that's going to cause your campaign to re-enter into learning. Now on this last bullet, if you're having a low volume of events, that's when you want to move up the funnel. And that statement actually goes right back to when we were talking about exiting the learning phase. So like we mentioned, you need 50 actions per ad set per week. If you're having trouble getting, let's say 50 purchases per ad set per week, that's when you would potentially want to try moving up the funnel. So going from a bottom of the funnel conversion action to maybe a mid funnel consideration action, because you're likely to have a higher volume of actions the more up the funnel you move. So we'll go back to the example of 50 purchases. Let's say I was struggling to get 50 purchases per ad set per week. We know a purchase conversion action is the warmest, hottest, most aligned action, let's say, with getting someone to make a purchase on a website. And it probably happens the least frequent. But what I could do to try to drive up that volume and get more signal is I could optimize for add to carts instead of purchases. So again, I moved slowly up the funnel a little bit. Add to cart is still pretty closely tied to my end goal, my end objective, but chances are it'll be a lot easier for me to get 50 add to carts per ad set per week than it would be for me to get 50 purchases per ad set per week. And then once I am able to build up that signal and have more volume and get out of learning, that's when you can try testing and moving back down the funnel to purchase conversions instead. And then just that overarching statement, the ad auction's a very literal process. So you want to make sure that your ad objective really matches back to your end goal. Now, a common question we get from folks is a boosted post an ad? And yes, There are technically two ways to create an ad on our platform. The first is by boosting an organic post, and the second is by going through the flow that we've been chatting about with creating an ad campaign in Ads Manager. Boosted posts are basically just when you have an organic piece of content that is doing really well, maybe it has really high engagement. You can see within the Facebook app or within the Instagram app the option to promote or boost now. And that basically just means, hey, would you like to put some paid dollars behind this already existing organic content so that more than just the people that like and follow your account see it? Essentially, a boosted post is really just a reach campaign. Whereas with Ads Manager and creating ads in Ads Manager, you actually are able to go through and build a campaign from scratch. So you're going through those different ad objective selections that we've just talked through, but you're also able to get a lot more strategic when it comes to the different audience targeting options that are available, and a lot more specific when it comes to customizing the creative for your ad campaign. Because with an ad built through Ads Manager, it's not an already existing post. So it's not an already existing piece of content. This is something that will not live forever on your feed or your timeline. I think that's a really common myth or question to debunk with a boosted post. Since that piece of content was already posted organically, that will live on your feed, on your grid, on your timeline. Whereas with ads created via Ads Manager, sometimes we hear folks refer to these as dark posts. And that's just because once that campaign is done, that piece of advertising content, that creative, is not going to live on your timeline, on your feed, or on your grid. Now, this slide does a great job of showing side by side the difference between boosting and Ads Manager creation. And like I mentioned, a boosted post is really just a reach ad. So it's one out of the 11 ad objectives that you have the opportunity to select from once you choose to create a campaign within Ads Manager. Boosting post happens within the app, whereas Ads Manager, you can't boost or create within the IG or the FB app. You have to actually go into the Ads Manager tool to do so. What's also nice about Ads Manager is that in addition to customizing things like audience and creative, you're also able to do split testing or A/B testing. We'll talk a little bit about it at the end of the presentation, but A/B testing is amazing if you're trying to pin two variables against one another. So does general interest targeting for one ad do better than specific, let's say, interest in geographical targeting instead? Or does a video outperform a photo? Really pinning two variables against one another. That type of testing is not available if you're just boosting posts. So if we go back to the meta ad objectives in the funnel that we looked at the start of the session, we can talk through some examples about what these different campaign objectives could look like. So for brand awareness at the top of the funnel, it could be a reach campaign that's using interest targeting to really promote a new product. And really, when we think about reach campaigns, that's sort of a spray approach in the sense of you're trying to get as many eyeballs as possible in front of that piece of content, in front of that ad, for example, that you've created. In the middle of the funnel with consideration campaigns, that's when you're thinking of, again, informing people more about your brand and your business. So it could be a traffic campaign to drive people to your website so that they can sign up for a monthly newsletter. It could be a video views campaign so that people can find out more about your brand or learn more about a tutorial, for example, that you have. So maybe it's a reel or a different type of video. And then lastly, conversion campaigns. So you're trying to get someone to take an action. So that could be purchasing from an e-com store. It could be purchasing an item, purchasing tickets, even just signing up for an event, for example, getting someone to take an action. So now that we've covered campaign level decisions, we're going to start to move down throughout that hierarchy at the start of the presentation to the ad set level. And at the ad set level, that's where you get to start to make decisions about the audience that's going to see this campaign. So a couple of different ways you can do audience targeting within our platforms. To start, there is interest targeting. So based off of just basic demographics, geographical information, you can target by city, by postal code, radius around a certain city. It can also be very, very broad, like country or even region. And then interests, and that can really be a secret sauce within our platforms. So you can target folks based off of interests that they've expressed within our platforms, other pages that they've said they've liked, for example. Lots of different ways that you can get around the interest piece. Custom and lookalike audiences are really, in my opinion, some of the most incredible and powerful audience targeting tools that we have. Custom audiences is basically focused on remarketing and retargeting an audience that has somehow already engaged or shown interest with your brand or your presence. And then lookalike audiences takes that one step further and basically helps you find an incremental audience that looks like the folks that are already showing interest in your presence. So within custom audiences, you're actually able to select and create a custom audience based on on-platform or on-platform signal. And what I mean by that is with on-platform custom audiences, you can remarket to people that have already engaged with your Instagram profile, for example, or if you've created an event on Facebook, you can create a custom audience of people that have already RSVP'd to attend that event. So you can see it's basically retargeting people that have already taken action with either your page or your IG account on our platforms. But you can also use off-platform sources. So you can create a custom audience based off of, let's say, an Excel sheet of people that have signed up to your website's newsletter. Or you can create a custom audience based off of people that have somehow engaged with a specific page on your website. So again, things that are happening off of a meta technology. Lookalike audience takes that whole custom audience idea one step further and says, okay, you can choose what you want the seed source for this lookalike to be. So you can basically choose something like a custom audience of those newsletter subscribers, or a custom audience of the people that already follow your IG account, for example. And then you can make some basic selections like geographic location, audience size, and we'll find people that look like this audience that are not already following you or engaging with you. And so you can see it's really amazing way to find an incremental pool of people for your brand. You're also able to play around with this little barometer here. This is the audience size meter. And basically a lookalike audience of 1% is a very hot, very similar audience to the seed source, but it's probably a smaller group of people. Whereas a lookalike audience of 10% is a much cooler, but much larger pool of people. So again, if you're looking for another split testing idea, you can try a lookalike audience of 3% versus a lookalike audience of 5% and see what actually makes the most sense for your brand, for your objectives, and for your business. A lot of folks ask me, Alex, what's the best way to run ad campaigns in Ads Manager to grow my Instagram following? And if you remember at the start when we talked about ad objectives, there wasn't an ad objective that was called Instagram followship or grow followship, for example. But the hack I like to suggest is if you run a reach campaign with a lookalike audience based off of your current IG followers, that's the best way to hack around creating a campaign to find people likely to follow your Instagram account and grow your IG followership. Now, as you start to make these selections about your audience targeting, this is what the view will look like more or less in Ads Manager. You'll see you're able to click this drop down, either create a custom or lookalike audience, but then you'll also be able to layer in some location, so geographical targeting, some of that basic demographic targeting, and then this is where you would enter in information about interest, for example. But as you start to make these selections, there's something called the audience meter on the side here that will tell you if your audience is looking too narrow, too broad. Definitely play around with it. Of course, these numbers are not specific, but they are a really good ballpark for you to identify maybe your audience is too broad. It might be more expensive for you to get the objectives you're looking for. That's when I'll always suggest trying to broaden up that audience. What's also really important about audience targeting is that going into campaign creation, I think we all have the tendency to think we know exactly who the audience is going to be for our campaigns. When we think about reach campaigns or top of funnel campaigns, you really don't know all the time who your audience is going to be, especially if you're trying to reach out to an incremental pool of people or grow followership, for example. So my suggestion is to always try going broad. You can then layer in things that make the audience more specific or narrow it down as you go, but starting off broad is usually best. Now, in addition to making selections about the type of audience that you're going to be speaking to with those campaigns. You can also specify where you want your ads to actually be seen. So what placements you want your ads to show up on. There are two options. So automatic placements basically just means that your ads will show up across all Meta platforms. So every app and platform that's a part of the family. Whereas with manual placements, you can specify not only which platform you want your ads to be shown on, but what location within that platform as well. And when I say that, I'll give the example of Instagram. So let's say you selected manual placements, you only want your ads to be seen on Instagram. You could select that you only want your ads to be seen, for example, on Instagram stories and not feed or explore or anything else. And that way, when you're going through and actually curating the creative for your ad, it would just be a creative that would fit the story configurations, for example. Of course, the more specific you get with placements, the less efficient it would be when it comes to spending budget and reaching an audience, because the more specific the placement selection, the smaller theoretically the pool of people that you would be reaching. You're casting a much more narrow net. So we always suggest to try automatic placements to start. That just will be the most efficient route for spending your budget and reaching a new audience. Now, I did want to touch briefly on shopping ads because we are seeing a lot more businesses use our platform for creating their own Instagram or Facebook shop and then redirecting folks out to their e-commerce website. So if you've ever seen these before, maybe when you're just browsing Instagram in your own personal time, shopping ads are basically just advertisements that have product tags associated with them. And a product tag is in this image right here. When I tap on it, I can see that black little rectangle open up that says Maxwell shoe. That's the product tag. And if I was to click on that product tag, I would be redirected within the IG app to the For All These Instagram shop, where I would see more information about that product and then be able to click to visit the website and then choose to make a purchase if I would like. So if you've ever heard about shopping ads or seen them before, that's exactly what the product is. Of course, this requires you to be onboarded to Instagram shopping, but lots of resources out there if that's something that would be interesting to you as well. Awesome. So moving down into the ad level for the actual ad creation. So at the ad level, that's when you're making decisions about what the actual visual, so the photo, video of your advertisement will look like. Now, as we continue to evolve, there are more formats that your ads can take. And so the ad specs are always changing. Again, this URL on the screen, you'll have a reference guide and resource that we'll share out after so you can see it. But this URL is always most up to date with all the different placements and all of the different ad specs for those specific placements. So that way you can make sure that your creative is being seen in the exact way that you want your audience to see it. There's also something called the ad library that I think is such an underutilized tool. So essentially, the ad library is a website that you can see all ads that are being run by a public page at any moment and any time. And it's honestly a really great place to look for some ad inspiration. So maybe you're launching your own water bottle company and you're not sure where to start with creative. You can go to the ad library, take a look and see, oh, seems like a lot of folks are focusing on video, for example. Maybe I'll try prioritizing some of my creative assets and focusing on making video first, since that seems to be what the market trend is. So it's honestly a really great place to look and see what other folks are trying, what they're testing. You can kind of get a sense of what's working and maybe what isn't. Now, for specific creative considerations, again, this is another one of those slides that has a lot on it, but we'll walk through it all right now. So for text and copy, you definitely want to limit the amount of text and copy that is seen on an image or a video. And that's just because if you think about your own feed browsing experience, and there's a lot of text, for example, it's not really something that provokes us to stop scrolling. And again, when you're creating creative, you always want to make sure that thumb stopping is at the focal point of your creation. When it comes to sound, a really common question that we get from folks, do I add it? Do I not? We usually provide the guidance that you want to design your creative to have sound off, but delight with sound on. So if someone is browsing on the go and chooses to open up and engage and hear audio, that experience is there for them. Now, when it comes to branding, especially with stories, I really recommend focusing on bookending your brand. So if you think about, for example, even your own personal story browsing experience, it can be really easy to start watching a bunch of stories and forget even whose story you're watching, or was this the third clip or the first clip kind of thing. And so we always suggest having either some sort of branding watermark in the bottom corner of the creative, top corner, whatever kind of works best with that actual visual. And then let's say you have a 10-second video clip. Within the first 3 seconds, you want to make sure the brand is there, and then also having it be at the very last slide. So that's that concept of bookending with your brand. If you are limited in visual assets in asset creation, and you can't have all the different specs that you've seen on the business guide, then try choosing Square or 4x5 for feed. That will kind of give you the biggest bang for your buck. And then when you are building out video, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the arts and visuals and the creation of it, but you want to make sure that that video still has a strong call to action. So if you're really trying to empower folks to donate to a cause or to learn more about you and your brand, give them more than just learn more about me or I want to share more about me. Redirect them to a website or tell them where to go so that they can donate or they can learn more. And that's a combination of using the strong call to action and the messaging of the actual creative, but then leveraging the CTA button. So that blue button that you'll see for an ad, that's the button that says learn more, donate now, shop now. You can customize it based on the ad objective that you selected. When you are creating Creative and Ads Manager, what's also awesome is you can actually preview what that ad will look like for all of those different placements and formats within the Ads Manager screen, so you can see how it will look before it goes live. And the last thing I want to call it is just creative fatigue. So that's our phrase of referring to when someone's maybe seeing the same creative or the audience has seen the same creative for an extended period of time. Of course, it's finding that fine balance between making sure that your creative is fresh and new and exciting. We're not swapping it out every week, for example, because we're going to set the campaign back into learning. So we do have within Ads Manager a reporting column that gives, based off of machine learning, some indication as to whether or not we think your campaign is entering into creative fatigue. It'll say creative limited or creative fatigue. And again, I really just encourage you to test and play around. There's a lot of resources that are available on the Help Center Facebook for Business website that talk a lot about creative fatigue. Now, when it comes to reporting, we know that there are a ton of tools that are out there for measuring attribution across different platforms. Google, some people even use third-party tools like a Spark or whatever it might be. And so we also wanted to just make sure you knew that there were some reporting options available within Ads Manager as well. So the screen that you're seeing right now is the home page or home view for Ads Manager reporting. As you can see, all of these different rows will list out all of your different campaigns. The columns are essentially performance or results that you would be tracking. And you can actually click on this columns button and customize the different columns that show up. So we can talk about that in just a few seconds. You can also actually export the information that is shown in this table. You can either export it as a CSV, or you can choose to build out some sort of custom report, and then it will be emailed to you on whatever cadence you decide. Now, even though it's not necessarily associated with reporting, I did want to call out that how you actually go in and create a net new campaign in Ads Manager is this green button right here. So when you click on the green create button, that would open up that window that would allow you to select the ad objective. So that very first campaign decision that we talked about at the start of the presentation. And then of course, you can always customize what the time frame is that is being shown here. You can look truly, there's lots of different ways. You could do 1 day, 3 months, 6 months. There's lots of different ways you can slice and dice this information. On that custom columns piece, so if you did choose to customize the columns that are being seen, you'll get a screen that looks like this that would open up. You can toggle on, toggle off as many columns as you would like. And you're also able to actually create a custom metric as well. So most of the basic and common results that people want to measure, like a cost per purchase or a cost per click, for example, that's all included here. But let's say you were selling water bottles again. And of course, since it's your business, you know what the actual profit margin per water bottle is. You could also create a custom metric that's actually showing you what your profit is. And that way, if you're just trying to pull up these reports and see really quickly profit numbers and get an idea, that would be something that would be visible to you. Now, we did talk about split testing at the start of the presentation, and so I wanted to quickly touch on what exactly split testing is. So a lot of folks will chat with me and say, oh yeah, I tested out a bunch of different audiences and this one seemed to do or perform better. And I'll ask, oh, well, what kind of test did you run? And they'll say, well, I put these 2 campaigns out into the world at the same time. And I'll ask if they set it up in a split test, and they'll say, no, I just have them both active at the same time. And what's tricky about that is it's not as clean and as clear of a testing sandbox. So if you are wanting to test 2 variables against one another, you always want to make sure that you're actually building a split test. And that's because when you program a split test, so again, it's an A/B test, you'll identify an audience, and then we will actually split that audience in half for you to make sure that it's a clean testing environment. So if you're again testing, let's say, video creative versus photo creative, half of the audience will only see the video and half of the audience will only see the photo. And then for whatever ad objective you've identified, so let's say it was a purchase conversion campaign, we will basically produce a winner or winning test group for you based off of that ad objective. So for this photo versus video split test, whichever test group A or B, had a lower cost per purchase because you chose a purchase conversion campaign, that's how we would identify the winning group for you. So you can see it's a lot more of a formal and accurate testing experience than just putting 2 campaigns into the market at the same time, because you never know, someone from campaign 1 could also see campaign 2 and vice versa. Now, a couple of different questions or even testing hypotheses that people will have when it comes to split testing and how to actually use the learnings that you get from the test. For example, when you look at audience or even ad set, if you see that one audience and ad set is performing better than the other, that's kind of when you know, okay, maybe we'll pivot our ad strategy or audience strategy. If you think about performance, maybe you ran a split test and you chose a traffic campaign, for example, as the objective, but you really want to drive purchases. Well, that's a great indication to go back and see, was that campaign objective really what was matching back to our end goal, or should we revise and rerun that test? I truthfully see the most split testing around different audiences and different ad creatives. And then lastly, just talking a bit about payments and logistics, another really common question that we get from folks. So what is the setup, or how does my ad payments essentially work? And basically, when you run a campaign in Ads Manager, you will select either a daily budget or a campaign budget, but you are only actually billed and charged for the amount that your ad has run. So let's say, for example, you selected to run a lifetime budget campaign of $1,000 for 1 week. But once that campaign was live, you actually paused it on day 2 because you ran out of product or something like that. You would not be charged the full $1,000. You would only be charged whatever amount was actually delivered and spent for 2 days. So I think that's a really important question to clarify. If for some reason there's an issue with the payment method that you've attached to your ad account, or there's an existing outstanding balance, your ads will actually be paused, and so they will not be run. You won't be charged until that's all cleared up. And when you are setting up a net new ad account, you'll be asked to select and provide a payment method. It can be a name of your credit card. I know we accept some debit cards that depend on the location and country you're in, as well as PayPal. I did mention this at the start, but just to reiterate, once an ad account has been created, it cannot be moved from one business manager to another, so it's not a movable asset. And then business managers also have a maximum on the net new number of ad accounts that can be created. So if you're having trouble with that, that's definitely when you would want to reach out to chat support and see. To be honest, we don't see that happen too much with smaller businesses and independent practices. It's much more of like the huge Coca-Cola and the Unilevers of the world that we see issues with that. But that was it for content-wise. I wanted to make sure I saved time for questions because I know I've seen a few trickle in throughout the session, and I wanted to be conscious to make sure that folks got a chance to actually answer or ask their questions.
Hello, I'm here. Everybody can hear me hopefully?
Yes, I can hear you at least.
Yeah. So we have a question. When you're running ads, is there a set amount of time you need to do it in order to run the ad for in order to get the best results in order for Facebook to understand what you're trying to look for?
Great question. And so the answer for that ties back to the whole learning phase concept. So for example, let's say, I mean, truthfully, it kind of depends on the business and the ad objective, but let's say you were running a purchase conversion campaign and you were trying to get people to buy a book off your website. If you were only going to run that ad for 1 week, but the campaign never got out of learning because it never achieved 50 purchases per ad set per week, then that would be too short of a time frame, for example. So what I usually tell folks is that the length of time for a campaign to be successful depends a lot on the size of the audience that they're reaching out to, the budget that they're willing to spend, and then the ad objective that they're selecting. So if you have a very short window of time that you want to drive a bunch of traffic or action to your website, that's maybe when you would want to use a mid or higher funnel objective, because you'll just get more volume on a per action basis than something like a conversion campaign. And then folks may say, well, that contradicts the concept of matching up your ad objective to your end goal, but that's where testing comes into play as well. So sometimes you can test and you can actually get farther with a mid funnel objective in a short window of time if that's what's going to get you out of learning faster kind of thing.
Makes sense. And then I've got another question. When it comes to Instagram and connecting your business, your ad manager, when you open an Instagram account as a creative account, it will open a business ad manager for you there as well. How do you connect the two sometimes?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. For it all to be connected, you want to make sure that your Instagram is being housed and lived in the same business manager as your page. So one way you can check that is if you go into Business Manager, business.facebook.com/settings. If you don't see your Instagram in there, it's probably in a different business manager. And that's when you'd want to reach out to support and make that switch over. Another kind of hack, I guess you can call it, is if you checked Business Manager and your page is in there, but your Instagram isn't, and you have a professional Instagram account, so a creator business account, an easy way to detach your Instagram from whatever business manager it's in is to actually revert it back to a personal account. I know that seems like very backwards, but if you revert it back to personal, it auto detaches. You can then pop it into that proper business manager where it should live, and then you can immediately convert it back to a professional one. So that's how you can make sure that when you're building ad campaigns, you can select from the drop down your page, you could select from the drop down your Instagram account by having them all live in the same business manager. And it's the business manager that also owns the ad account.
Brilliant. And then last question from me. Can you run ads with Reels?
So you can. What is currently available right now globally is you cannot boost posts. So you cannot boost Reels, for example. You can run ads from Reels in Ads Manager, so only through that Ads Manager creation. But the big asterisk is the audio piece. So it has to be original audio, and that's just, of course, for rights manager rights manager issues and audio rights issues. So if you own the audio and it's original audio, when you go to the ad level and you select existing posts as your ad creative, you'll be able to see feed posts, stories, and reels, and you can scroll down. And you'll know if you're able to run the reel as an ad because it'll be grayed out. You won't be able to select it if it's not original audio.
Brilliant. I think that's all the questions.
Awesome.
Hang on. There's one last point. Hang on.
Okay.
Is there any option for museum or heritage or history in the audience interest targeting, or can we browse those terms?
You definitely can. So within audience interest targeting, I've seen folks get generic and interest in history, but also you can target people that have liked or shown interest in other like more macro pages. So I'm going to make this up now, but I live in New York. So I can target people that have interest in the Met, for example, because that's obviously like a very famous and prominent museum. So there's ways you can play around it for sure.
Brilliant. Yep, I think that's it. There we have it.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. I really hope that you found this to be a helpful session, and it was nice to virtually visit you all from New York this morning.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Enjoy the rest of your day.
See you all soon.
Bye.
See you soon, guys. Bye.